Please pay attention. Alan's very precise with his words. Volume 1, Racial Oppression and Social Control. And I'll just say one thing before there was some passing reference to the theory and national oppression. But Alan comes out of that tradition, but by 1974, he's distinguishing between racial and national oppression. This is very important for people interested in that history. Social control, crucial to understanding what develops. And this last one, origin. He uses origin in the singular, the origin of racial oppression, and here's why. He says, in choosing the subtitle, I meant it to be consistent with the argument of the book. Class struggle was the origin of racial oppression. And he gets in and elaborates that. All right. This is a fellow, Carl Davidson. Some of the old timers might know, but he's been around, and he knew Alan way back. But what he says here, and if you go to my webpage, on Harrison and Allen, I have all kinds of comments from activists and scholars on the importance of their work. People you've read, you know. But Davidson, what he says here, I think is on point. You have to work to get through these 2 volumes, but once you do, it will change your life and outlook forever. You simply can't understand America and who we are without this book. So that's kind of high praise, I think.
Davidson.
Carl Davidson.
A lot of people read Port Side, right?
Right. Yeah, and online. Right, and he does online University of the Left and a number of other things. He's very active still, but he was a big SDS activist and many other things over his life. Okay, here's what Alan writes on the back cover of Volume 1 of The Invention of the White Race. When the first Africans arrived in Virginia in 1619, there were no white people there, nor, according to the colonial records, would there be for another 60 years. The word white does not appear in a Virginia colonial record until 1691. But it's not simply that the word white doesn't appear. The white race, as we know it, was not functioning. And he bases this on going through 885 county years of Virginia colonial records. He was camped out in Richmond going through all these primary sources. And I now have his papers, which we're looking to place at a major repository, but he's got over 1,000 pages of transcribed notes from this early period. No one else has done this. And what he's always doing is he's looking at wherever in the records laboring people had a voice, the African-American woman, Dutch man, you know, the English, Irish, whatever. So it's a major resource. Alan goes on to elaborate on that. Others living in the colony at the time were English. They had been English when they left England, and naturally they and their Virginia-born children were English. They were not white. White identity had to be carefully taught over the next 60 years. Didn't come naturally, right? Had to be taught. We'll get into that. Here's a case that might interest you. John Punch, 1640. Still no white people. John Punch is what's called, and I'll explain this a little more in a second, a chattel bondservant. He escapes with 2 other chattel bondservants. They were limited term. They served a few years. And he escapes with Victor, a Dutchman, and a Scotchman called James Gregory, still not white, right? And John Punch, who's of African descent, gets the harshest punishment because the plantation owners, whenever they thought they had someone who might be vulnerable, would try and impose harsher penalties, whether it be a woman, a youth, whatever, right? And in this case, they tried to sentence John Punch to lifetime servitude. Now, this is what's of particular interest to this is, that's the only record in all the colonial records on John Punch. But John Punch, Ancestry.com, did a big piece about 4 years ago on John Punch, because John Punch is related, it turns out, to our president, Barack Obama. But it's not on his African father's side, but on his mother's side, right? All right. Bacon's Rebellion, 1676, 1677. This is a big event. I'm going to get into this in more depth. But in Bacon's Rebellion, in that insurrection, the poor and working people, European and African American, fighting together, demanding their freedom from bondage. They kick out the governor. They burn Jamestown. And in the final stages, a ship captain was one of the people sent to put them down, and he writes, I there met 400 English and Negroes in arms, still not white, right, who were much dissatisfied. Some were for shooting me, and others were for cutting me in pieces. I told them that they all were pardoned and freed from their slavery. Most of them I persuaded to go, except in the end, 80 Negroes and 20 English would not deliver their arms. Still not white, right? So Allen argues this is supreme proof that the white race did not exist at that time, such solidarity, because you wouldn't see it for the next few hundred years, right?